Rick, all set.
Good evening. My name is Rick Leaf. I'm Chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. This open meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on March 29th, 2023. All members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The act allows the Master Plan Implementation Committee to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. And with that, I'll take the attendance for the evening. Julianne Hirsch.
Here.
Amy Paretsky.
Here.
Millie Milton sent me an email and said she will not be with us tonight. Ashley Davies.
Here.
Tracy Camerano.
Here.
Fran Backstrom.
Here.
Gene Kennedy.
Here.
Gene Cahill.
Here.
Rick Leaf is here. John Campbell.
Here.
Jen Tolman.
Here.
From the staff, Lori Connors.
Here.
Anybody else from the staff here tonight, Lori?
No.
Okay, so that's good. Basically, almost full attendance tonight, which is good. So I'll move on to the meeting agenda for tonight. I have a number of items to cover around things going on in the downtown. So we'll start with this downtown beautification, some of the work going on for plans to add some planters and do some planting to beautify the downtown. So Lori, why don't you and Julianne sort of take us through this one?
I am going to ask Julianne to start.
Okay.
Well, we can start off with a little bit of a funny story. I had been reaching out to Mass DOT to get permission to do some planting on those strips between the parking lot at Mobile and the street, as well as the corner of 135 and 20. And I finally got in touch with the right person who was on his way home last week in the middle of the day and said, can you meet me downtown in 10 minutes? And I quickly called Lori and she was available. So the three of us conversed and looked at the strips where we want to do some planting. And the gentleman was really nice and really supportive, thought it was a great idea, advised us not to dig too deep, to bring in some soil and the whole thing. And so he was very agreeable to the project, as well as putting a planter on the island at Church and Main Street. So the next day I went down and got my soil samples and brought them to UMass Extension, and we're waiting for an analysis of the soils. And then Gary Phillips, who you all hopefully have met. If you haven't met him, try to meet him. He's going to provide us with some drought-tolerant natives and grasses that will probably do very well there. So that's where we are with that little bit.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was really serendipitous. Kind of, it could only happen like that.
Yeah,
Well,
so
thank you.
that was really exciting. And then, of course, at the end of the last fiscal year, I ended up buying 4 additional planters. So there are 4 planters that everybody can look at the Church Street Bridge. So then the new 4 planters are going to be distributed on the CVS side. I did actually, we spoke to the same gentleman about the possibility of painting the utility boxes.
Yeah.
And he also was agreeable about that. And so that was a huge relief. So Jen, it looks like that project is a go. He did want to know a little bit of specific information as to whether it would be a wrap or whether it would be painting. So when you have more information, we'll just share that with the gentleman so that he can give us the final blessing. So then, of course, Julianne, I know, went to bat for 4 additional planters. So what we were expecting, as I mentioned, is to just put the 4 planters that we have on the CVS side. So then we wouldn't have any planters at all on the common side of the street. So she went to bat for that. So I will be ordering 4 additional planters next week. And she was able to secure sufficient funding for the plants and the soil as well. So we will have 12 planters this year. So that's pretty exciting. And then I did reach out with Rick's assistance to the folks who own the banner hardware. So they, of course, do the fundraising for Applefest. So the idea was to see if we could use the banner hardware as a fundraising campaign to possibly do a winter banner. So it'd be similar to, of course, what they do for Applefest. As you know, the banner hardware is not in use during the winter season. So after some back and forth, they did agree to provide the banner hardware. However, they wanted to receive a good amount of the funds that we raise to benefit Applefest. So the portion that would actually go to downtown revitalization would probably be in the realm of $2,000 per banner. So it's not great. It's not what I was hoping for, but of course it is their banner hardware. So it would pay for landscaping improvements, including the plants, for a couple of years. So of course, I think that would be a win for both of us. And then we would have colorful banners during the winter season when things look particularly bland and glum. So that would be a beautification effort in itself.
Lori, who is it that owns the hardware? Who controls that? And what does it cost to get our own hardware? What are the other options? I feel like they're maybe playing hardball. Can we come back with a counteroffer?
Well, Michelle Gillespie is the chair of the committee, so I'm not exactly sure what their name is, but they run Applefest. So they do all of the events for Applefest, and of course she explained that it's become increasingly difficult for them to secure the money they need to put on a really good show for Applefest. So one of the things that she was concerned about is that if we also do banners, so even if we get our own hardware and we do banners on telephone poles that they are not using, then we would be competition. So maybe businesses who currently buy banners for Applefest wouldn't buy. They'd buy banners for downtown revitalization and then not Applefest. So they would further have issues raising the funds that they need.
It seems like The fact that the business owners could agree once to have banners up, and under this scenario, they'd have their banners up for a longer period of time. Right now, the banners go up for Apple Fest, and then they come down around Veterans Day, and the veterans banners go up, and they stay up around the Veterans Day holiday, and then everything sort of comes down until Apple Fest next year. So basically, the Apple Fest people could sell the businesses on a larger contribution because their banners would stay up longer. They'd go up for Apple Fest, they'd come down for Veterans Day, and they go back up and stay up through the winter. So they get more exposure over the course of an entire year. And for that, they feel they could ask them for a larger donation, and then they direct some of that money back to Lori for help with downtown revitalization. But the basic thing would be the Apple Fest committee would be sort of controlling the interaction with the business owners, managing the hardware and managing the intake of money. But
Yeah.
they'd at least be willing to split some of the proceeds with the town. I think the only thing that
How many
might,
banners are there? I'm sorry, how many banners
That makes
are
more,
there?
sorry, just that makes more sense, Rick, that when you explain it that
Yeah.
way, that they would be keeping most of the money. Sorry, go ahead, Fran. Sorry. How many?
I'm sorry, I was just asking, how many banners are they? I mean, it's like a dozen, I mean, I can't, like a dozen of them or so?
no, there's more than that. If I had to
Okay,
guess,
so
Yeah,
$2,000 a pop.
Michelle didn't give me the pricing. She says that they currently charge $300.
Okay.
So, and they don't always have a new banner every single year. So that's one of the deals. Like I know when I did a banner program previously, I would sell a winter banner one year. Then I would sell a rest of the year banner the next year. And then the third year, I wouldn't sell any banners, and then I'd start over again. So I would do the winter banner the next year, and then the year-round banner. And it sounds like they do a similar thing. So they use the Apple Fest banners for a couple of years. They use the hero banners for a couple of years. So I imagine the winter banners would be for a couple of years as well. I mean, the benefit
Just,
of partnering is that we have the potential to sell banners every year. So there would be money coming in every year instead of, once every 3 years.
I just need, I thought you said it's about $2,000 a banner that we would get, but you
No.
meant not, if they're only getting $300 a banner, we're not gonna get $2,000 a banner. I was just confused as
No.
to how much
No.
overall would be coming back about.
Yes, that would be the lump sum. So I know when I
Okay.
did the banner programs, each time I sold a banner, so on average, I would sell 40 banners every year that I did it. And I would pocket about $9,000. So, it was a super wonderful fundraiser because I would have that infusion of cash. 9,000 one year, 9,000 the next year, and then I'd have a year where I didn't make any money, and then it would start over again. So, yeah. So it was kind of, the conversation didn't go quite as well as I had hoped. However, once again, $2,000 is better than no dollars, which is the current situation that we're in. And the important thing is the buy-in of the businesses. So the buy-in of the businesses into the downtown, whether it be through Apple Fest or downtown beautification, it's still buy-in. So I think that that's a win-win.
and I think developing a partnership between the town and the Apple Fest committee through this project is a beginning, and I think it's got the potential to grow into more things and probably additional funding as time goes by. So I advise Lori that at this point, let's just get a good working relationship going with them. I think at some point, if the town was willing, the way I understand from Michelle is that the town doesn't really provide any funding for Apple Fest directly, or minimal funding for Apple Fest. I'm not sure exactly what the relationship is, but to the point that the town would provide more funding directly to Apple Fest, that would give her more flexibility to have a better distribution of other funds she raises back, what Lori is doing. So there's a number of different avenues that we can follow once this partnership starts going down the path here.
I have a question. So, maybe it's not direct money, but I know like the Cultural Council and other groups in town do pay a fee to have a table at the Apple Fest. So there is some revenue coming from town groups, going towards Apple Fest. It might not be from the town specifically, but our table was, I forget, $50, $80, $100, whatever it was. And other, groups in town who also have tables also have to pay a certain fee. But Lori, back to the banners. I had sent you a photo from Marlboro that just said like, welcome to Marlboro or welcome to Franklin. Would we consider only doing like a more generic banner instead of being more business oriented that just said, welcome to Northborough at all during the
Well-
spring season?
Well, one of the things that I had talked to Michelle about is doing the winter banner, because I know that they definitely don't use the banner hardware during the winter. So that would be a completely new thing. And, that, in my opinion, is the most challenging time of year, just because it's so gray and dull. And so I think that putting banners up during the winter would really make a big difference to the appearance of the downtown during the winter season. So in experience, with the winter banner, I think it would be important, especially if we want to have longevity with the banner, is to not make it too Christmassy. Because of course, if it's looking too Christmassy and it's February, then people are like, why do they still have Christmas banners up in February? That looks ridiculous. So the style of the banner we'd have to be careful to make it so it's festive but winter themed as opposed to holiday themed, just so that we get more bang for the buck and we're able to keep the banner up longer. And then, after the Christmas season, we could see how it goes. And then maybe we could do a springtime banner, because of course, that gives us the possibility of another, because Apple Fest banners, where do they go up in August or
August, yeah.
September?
August.
August. Okay, so then we have the potential of doing another banner that can go up from, say, March or April, all the way through to that August date.
Mhm.
So we have two options, two banner options. So I would do one type one year and then another type the next year.
I guess the other thing also is, after the Apple Fest banners come down and the veterans banners go up, there's a decision made as to when the veteran banners come down. Every time banners go up and down, I guess there's a fee that's got to be paid to get someone to put them up and down, kind of thing. And so the veterans banners may stay up into the holiday season for a while anyway, in which case the winter banners may not go up until after Christmas is over, altogether. It all depends on the timing of when things go up and down. But Michelle had mentioned to me that she wants to reduce the expense of putting banners up and down as much as possible. So it could be that the winter banners don't go up till after the first of the year, which would make them Christmas theme kind of obsolete, anyway, kind of thing. But those are all details that need to be worked out. But once again, it seems to me that at least there's a partnership being developed here that I think can be leveraged to everybody's benefit going forward.
I have two questions. One is, so we're talking about banners, and I feel like you know, this could be very attractive, or it could be like, oh my gosh, more banners in town. There's a lot of a few businesses that have an excessive amount of signs in their windows and on their property. And I'm wondering if I think they're not in compliance with the current bylaws, and this might be an opportunity to, you know, kind of bring that under control and leverage the banners that they could do, you know, more uniformly on the poles. But my other question is, who's going to pick the banners? Who's going to pick the style? And
Yeah, I mean, I know, you know, in the past, I've always had like a little committee choose the banners. I'm not sure because of course we just had that initial conversation with Michelle about the banners, so we didn't work out the logistics. I know she wants to have control over the hardware and the money and whatnot. I'm hoping and you know, she wants us to use the same vendor that she uses for the banners. So I'm sure, like, for example, I know that I myself would like to have some input on the banners design. And I imagine that some of you may also have an interest in the banner design. So if we go forward, I mean, how do you feel about it? Do you want to have input on the design? Because, you know, I'd be happy to say that we're willing to partner with you, but this committee wants to have the input on the banner design, if that's how you feel. If you don't care, then I'll tell her, sure, you guys just pick and do whatever you want.
I mean, go ahead, Julianne, I have some comments and questions about it.
no, go ahead.
I mean, I guess I'm wondering, you know, so they have the hardware and they do this for Applefest, which is awesome. And we're kind of trying to tag along, but this is in the downtown. And now if we do create a downtown revitalization committee, you know, that's a sort of a subcommittee of this group or whatever it may be, that's sort of in charge of beautifying the downtown, as we're already starting here. It would make sense for a group like that to be the overseer of the banners and all of this, and making sure that it all works together well. And if the town is doing the putting up and taking down, is there still a cost to us if we're the ones that are asking for it to be done? And, you know, maybe there's some efficiency in going that route. And I know there's something in place, and I don't know what the agreement is between the Applefest group and the town as is. So that would need to be explored, but I'm just curious, you know, I just feel like there's some that we should look into what the best way to do this is. But I think Julianne's point, well taken. We should have some sort of oversight when we're trying to beautify the downtown. This is all part of it, and it's going towards this long-term strategy to do that. So,
you know, in my experience with banners, originally the DPW ended up doing them for free, but it ended up being so problematic that we ended up having to pay. So even though it was a municipal fundraiser to benefit, but initiated by a municipal department, in order to get it done, we ended up having to pay, because otherwise they just put us on the back burner to such a point that you know, it'd be after Christmas that the Christmas banners would be going up. So I suspect that we are going to have to pay to have them installed, regardless of whether it's initiated by this group and my department, or whether it's an Applefest effort.
okay, that makes sense. But in terms of efficiency, I meant that, but also, you know, if there are other, you know, right now the banners would be I'm not sure what we'd be looking for the funding to pay for, but as things evolve, you may want to redirect funding to different things. And it would be nice to have some more control over, you know, how it's done and the costs and everything else. So just my 2 cents on.
Yeah,
maybe
I
looking into it.
suspect that we're gonna have to find another fundraiser. You know, we're gonna have to come up with our own thing that is not going to be stepping on the toes of Apple Fest. You know, if you folks could put your thinking caps on and, you know, we could continue to discuss potential fundraisers going forward.
So I have a question. We are not an entity that can actually raise money, though. I mean, we're not a 501c3, so I don't know. I guess we'd have to really figure out how that would work, right? I would imagine.
The Cultural Council does. We do the doors auction each year and the money is donated to the town. So
Or-
into the town account.
This organization, right?
The
Oh,
Cultural
sorry,
Council.
Fran, you kind of froze there for a minute.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to
Sorry.
interrupt. I
Yeah,
thought you
I mean,
said
I'm just saying
I'm
we
sorry.
need to think about that, right? I have to, I do want to say that I thought Julianne's point made if we can encourage businesses to advertise in a more tasteful manner than filling their windows, that probably is a good idea, right? I mean, but are we gonna have a subcommittee on what kind of flowers go in the pots? Because I mean, at some point, we have to relinquish control over something to just a person. I mean, and I'm comfortable with it if it's being done through the planning department, that it be done by the planning department. Because otherwise, it takes a lot to get things done if everybody has to be a part of a decision process. I personally don't care what the flowers are or the banners for the most part, but just my thoughts.
Well, Lori, you know, once this moves down the road a little bit, you can sort of figure out kind of a process here. You might want to touch base with Julianne. It seems like the two of you are kind of working fairly closely together on beautification and, you know, just see, if nothing else, you know, at some point, does the select board want to get some input or an update on what this is going to happen and, you know, have some way of reviewing or, you know, nodding their heads about it kind of thing. So, you know, why don't you guys kind of put your heads together on that? And then if there's something else you want to present back to us, you know, I agree with Fran that I think our role here is just to make sure things continue to happen, but not to sort of be the overseer of everything happening downtown. So just see what you guys can come up with. But I think, you know, even though our committee doesn't have the ability to raise funds, if any of us have ideas that we can give to Lori for programs she might want to do or set up, I think we can definitely feed ideas back to Lori. And, you know, Jen, I think, you know, your group is already doing, you know, that kind of work. So you may have some ideas also, or could work in conjunction with Lori to see how some of your activities might, you know, go towards improving the downtown also. So some
Oh,
synergy there.
Can
All
I
right,
make-
well,
Can I
first
make
of
a
all,
suggestion, actually?
Jean has her hand up.
please,
Could I'd like to move that we establish a subcommittee who can start to handle all of these integrated projects, because Lori's come up with so many good ideas about, you know, the walkways improvement program and the Blake Street program, and now the planters and now the banners. There's just so much that it seems like if we had a team that was coordinating like all of these different efforts, coming up with kind of how they're going to work and how they're going to get funded and how to sell plaques to businesses and, you know, do it in the right way, I think that would be just a savings on our committee kind of playing with this, but not really getting it moved forward very effectively.
I'll happily join that.
Me too.
Mhm.
I would
Would
propose
that-
a subcommittee of 3 to 4 people who could work with Lori and Julianne.
well, why don't we do this? Lori, could you, first of all, is there anyone on the committee that's opposed to setting up a subcommittee of our committee that would work more closely, you know, with Lori in terms of trying to implement some of these ideas? Am I hearing any opposition to that?
I'm not opposed to it. I'm just trying to think whether or not there already is something set up on the matrix as to part of, you know, the priorities and the leads you know, what departments and what groups are supposed to be part of this. So I was trying to, while you were talking, look at the matrix to see whether, do we already have that thought in some type of format?
I think the closest thing in the matrix to this would be if in fact the town finally hired an economic development coordinator, this might fall into that person's purview. That'd be a good thing for that person to be working on as far as the overall economic development of the town and the downtown kind of thing. But in the absence of that, right now, I think it's falling to Lori to kind of coordinate these things. So maybe the thing to do would be to have Lori think through the best way to manage this and make a proposal to us that we could, vote on at our next meeting. And once again, Lori, if you want to work with Jen and Julianne to kind of think through, how this would look and how many people should be on it, what it would do, and then we could, sort of, take action on that at the next meeting.
Sounds good.
I just have my hand up, but I don't have a button to raise my hand. I never have. I don't know why.
Okay.
But I do think that's a great idea. And I do think that like Julianne, Lori, and I, and a couple other people have already been working hard with the flowers and the planters. And so I think having a subcommittee out of this committee who's been part of the downtown committee would be great. And I think it would be good to get some input, not just like one person, because if I know we're already working on it as a group anyways, so it's kind of hard to handle as one or two people. So I think, a subcommittee out of here, and I've actually gotten a couple more volunteers to help with the planters. So now that there are 12, we don't want to turn away any of the help. It might necessarily not have to be on the subcommittee, but if they're involved, they might want to be.
Yeah.
But
Okay, well, let's bring this back up at the next meeting. Have Laura give us a proposal, how this would work, and Laura, you can sort of contact some of these people that have been working with you anyway and put together an idea. And, we can decide on how we're going to do it at the next meeting. And Jean, thanks for that suggestion, and we'll go forward with that. Anything else about downtown beautification? I'd like to, thank Lori and Julianne and, Amy's been working on this too, for kind of work going on in the background to kind of move this thing forward. I think that, until we get further down the road and in more redevelopment activities, anything we can do to improve the appearance of the downtown will be especially helpful. And Julianne, thanks to you for the work you did working with Mass DOT to sort of get this to move to this point. And it's really good that that person showed up and was enthusiastic about doing this work. So it gives us something to work off of. So hopefully we'll see some things rolling out as the weather improves this spring kind of thing. All right, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is where we stand with the Adopt a Tree program that Lori reviewed with us at the last meeting. Go ahead, Lori.
Okay, so Rick put me in touch with I think the director of horticulture at the Tower Hill Botanical Garden. So I received some feedback from him on the species of large shade trees and small ornamental trees. Some of the ones that were on the list he was happy with, and then he had some suggestions for some substitutions for some of the others. So when it came to the large shade trees, he suggested getting rid of the pin oak, and there was one other type that he didn't like. And he suggested going with a white oak or a thornless honey locust. So I revised the list to take out the ones that he didn't like and put in those new options. And he did suggest another option, but they weren't sold at Bigelow's. So I didn't include that on the list. So for the large shade trees, we have red maple, maidenhair, thornless, honey locust, and white oak. For the small ornamental trees. He also suggested substituting a couple of the options with some alternatives. So the list now includes Rutgers hybrid dogwood, Eastern redbud, sweet bay magnolia, ivory silk Japanese tree lilac, and American hophorn bean. So those were on the list. Some of the species that he had suggested were quite a bit more expensive than the options that I had originally put on the list. And, you know, I was thinking about the fact that this is supposed to be a 2-year program. And I was thinking about the fact that the prices increase so significantly between when I had originally designed the program in 2024 and 2022 and today. So I modified the miscellaneous cost category so that it would be 12% of the subtotal of the rest of the acquisitions. So instead of going with a program that costs $25,000, that ended up adjusting the cost of the program up to $30,000. So it was just shy of $30,000, $29,887. So that's the current status. And I do understand that the select board is considering a tree replacement policy, and that would affect trees throughout the town. And of course, this planting program is focused on just the center. So that is a program that's happening simultaneous to this. So I'd be interested in hearing from Julianne what she thinks about the increase in price of the $30,000 and whether you think that this is something that would be supported by the select board through the ARPA program.
So, you know, I can't speak for the select board, but I think $30,000 for the benefit of trees, it not just beautification, but climate, providing shade, all of that. I mean, it's you know, well, you know how I feel about trees. So I think we have a very good chance, let me put it that way.
Okay. When do you think I should come forward to the select board with this program?
I would say send them the proposal as soon as you can, because I think after town meeting, we're gonna start working on that ARPA list.
Okay.
So if it's almost all done, no harm in sending it.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll plan on sending it next week then. But do you folks have any further comments?
You know, Lori had sent out the modified list today to us, so I'm not sure if everybody got a chance to read it yet, but go ahead, Jean.
So my concern again is the care of the trees, not just the planting. So as the tree warden is approving the siting, I think we need the buy-in of the owner of the property that as to how it will be managed. And that they will be watered appropriately, you know, in their early years. I'm also wondering, is there any other vendor than Bigelow's that we could go with that may provide trees at kind of scale, lower cost, anything like that? Has that been looked into?
I could look at that. The reason why I chose Bigelow is because they're local. And whenever you're doing a program like this, it's, in my opinion, always a good idea to give a bone to the local business. So you're encouraging people to shop local, you're giving money to a local business. So it ends up being a win-win, in my opinion. As far as caring for the tree, the application, so the street tree program participation form requires signatures from the applicant assuming that they are not the property owner, and the property owner attesting that they agree to care for the tree. So if they aren't willing to care for the tree, then they don't get a tree. That's kind of the way it works. Oh,
But those bags make it very easy. Those bags makes for less watering. And I remember I was wondering how they worked, but Amy has a friend who is a tree expert, and she explained to me that they're, you know, that they work, they're not harmful to the trunk of the tree. So I think that eliminates some of the care.
We
And-
used them when we did the downtown tree planting back in the early 2000s. We used the bag of trees. They still all died. I think it just has to be, we have to provide directions with the trees as to, this is what we mean, you know, when you're signing on the line, this is what you're agreeing to do, which is to water with this regularity, to maintain mulch, whatever, you know, are the best practices to keep those trees alive, I think would be prudent on our part.
So I'm curious about why that project failed the last time. Do you think it was the property owners?
No, I
or
think it
were-
was that the garden club members were the ones who were watering, and we had to drag water down in jugs to, you know, try to keep the trees hydrated. They had very little catchment area. They were just baking in the sun, and property owners weren't working with us to keep the trees alive. The only ones that survived are the ones that are now in front of CVS, and they had a really large bed in which to grow. And even when they redeveloped the CVS, those trees survived.
Did you also plant the trees in front of the church, the Trinity Church?
I don't know about Trinity churches. I know trees were planted along First Parish on Church Street, and those include Sweet Bay, Sweet Gum, which are doing really well, and maple. And those trees, again, they had the whole lawn of area for roots to grow. And so I think it's really, you know, the appropriate placement, and the fact that the tree doesn't depend on being watered like 50 gallons a day from a human, but can get its water, you know, supplemented, but basically has enough room to absorb water.
Good to know.
I would suggest, if Julianne, you think that selectmen would be amenable to bake in some funding for the tree warden, more funding for the tree warden long-term, because I think a lot of times street trees fail because it's really hard for them to thrive in that sort of environment. And I think leaving it to the owners is not a great idea. I feel like there has to be an expert that really understands how they should be planted, how they should be cared for, especially in the first few years, because they're going to struggle, and there needs to be some real care taken. Otherwise, we're going to be having the same discussion again. Like Jean said, they tried it in 2020. So I mean, I really think it needs to be something we're thinking a lot about, the care of them, and not just thinking that they're going to work with the property owners taking care of them. I had two other questions. Did Bigelow's, I think they donated the trees at Ellsworth McAfee. Is that who did that? I'm just trying to remember, because whoever provided the trees there, I think the trees got destroyed by a storm, and then they were replanted, and it was really great. And whoever did that was wonderful. And I don't remember if it was Bigelow or not. And I had one more question, and it's failing me now, so I'll just leave it at that.
And we can have the conversation with Bigelow to see if they will sell them at cost, instead of, you know, their typical pricing. So I'm not sure how that conversation will go, but I never hesitate to ask for freebies or reduced rates. And the tree warden, so the way I wrote the participation program, the participation form, is the tree warden would ultimately approve. So if somebody is interested, so let's say, so what I'm anticipating is that we will plant 35 trees a year. So some of the trees may be planted in the fall, some of the trees may be planted in the spring. But ultimately, when we receive the applications, the tree warden will go out there and he will ultimately approve the location. So they have a say, certainly. But if they say, you know, they want the tree planted to the left of their front door, and then the tree warden goes out there and says, well, you know, that's not really going to work. So it needs to be the right of the front door. Then he would have that conversation with the property owner. And ultimately they would agree on a location. If he goes to a location and where the property owner wants to plant the tree is super close to a wetland or in a wetland, then the tree warden would be able to say, yeah, that's not the best location. Either pick another location or, you know, we're gonna give the tree to somebody else. So I did give him quite a bit of leeway to ultimately approve the location. So, you know, my vision of this program is that we would pick streets that are definitely within the center, but they don't necessarily have to be Route 20. So they could be, you know, on River Street or on School Street. So it could be, you know, residential properties as well as business properties.
And I was just curious, how you're going to decide. Are you just going to kind of go out and ask or send letters or something to people in these areas and see who responds?
Yeah, so what I was envisioning is sending letters to the designated streets. So everybody on the designated street would have a letter, and it's a completely voluntary program. They would fill out their participation program and they would sign. So then they would, you know, mail the form back to me. And then we'll go through the forms, look at the locations and determine who gets a tree.
Lori,
Awesome.
I don't want to
think my
belabor.
only other, sorry, go ahead, Jean.
You
Sorry, I just had a lot of comments. I'm sorry. My only other comment was, I know, you know, the state does this street tree program and they do it in the gateway cities. So obviously we weren't eligible for that, but I'd be curious, maybe, I mean, I'd be happy to call the program and just see, you know, how successful it's been, what kind of like lessons learned there have been from some of those efforts, just to see if there's anything that we should be taking into consideration.
Oh, I would love that if you could
Okay.
do that. And I know National Grid also has a grant program. So their grant applications are due in the fall. So what we could do is, you know, see how successful it is, and we could get, you know, the reason why it's limited to 35 trees is because that's what the tree warden, otherwise known as the DPW director, thought that they could accomplish with volunteers in a given year. So they definitely have limitations as to how many trees can be planted, just because of all the other tasks that they have to do. So we will need volunteers as well to help get these trees in the ground.
Jean, you had another comment?
Yeah, I guess this ties back to what I was asking about earlier with the downtown focused beautification effort, a subcommittee. Would kind of a different way of approaching this same program would be to say, wouldn't it be great to have trees on this one street? You know, River Street could use trees, or this corner of this parcel would just be the perfect place for this placement. And then we approach, you know, as opposed to making it open program, just approach those property owners who that committee think, you know, where those placements might be really optimal or coordinated, where you could get, you know, perhaps kind of a row of, you know, trees together, that kind of thing, crossing different properties like that, as opposed to it being a voluntary, you know, interest, trying to interest the neighborhood, just approaching those property owners whose properties could really benefit from the
You
placement.
know, in my experience, you would think that trees are super popular, but they're not. In my experience, it's going to be a struggle to find people who are interested in the trees. So I can totally see where you're coming from, and I think that's a great idea. But I think the likelihood of the places where we think trees should be planted and people who own those parcels actually agreeing is probably pretty slim. So I don't want to waste time trying to convince people that, because also we want people to be motivated to take care of the trees. So I don't want to have to like beat people into accepting a tree or guilt them into it. I want people who are participating in the program really want a tree and really be willing to take care of it and do what it takes. So, you know, just based on my experience, I think there are some specific public properties that could possibly benefit from additional street trees, and then we'll just put them there. But when it comes to, you know, like homeowners, I don't want to approach them and be like, hey, I think you need a tree here, and then be like, no, forget it, go away.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Gene. What struck me about the program, though, would be if we did go out and recruit some areas that we thought were good, and the deal was, we think it would really be great to have a tree here. You have to keep track of it and maintain it, okay? You know, that's a little bit a harder sell than saying, listen, we think there should be a tree there. Just give us the permission to put it there and we'll take care of it. That would be an easier sell than we think there should be a tree here, but by the way, it's your job. At least by letting people come back to us, we know the ones who come back to us understand the rules of the game at the beginning, and so there shouldn't be this battle about who's taking care of it. I think the points have been raised about making sure it is taken care of well need to be lined out clearly in the program. But if we were going to plant and maintain the tree, I think we'd be in a better position to go out and ask people if we could put it on their property or near their property. But if we're going to ask them to maintain it, we have a better chance of success if they volunteer. So we'll just have to see how that works. Everybody, are there any other comments about the program? If Lori's going to send this off to the select board in the next couple of days, just want to make sure that there's, you know, once again, people on the committee here are okay with the program, and as it's been discussed tonight, are okay with it. Am I hearing any? Go ahead,
I have
Lori.
one more question. So Lori, you mentioned that you gave the tree warden some guidelines already. So we want these trees to be shade trees so that it provides shade to the sidewalk or of the street a little bit. How far in are we hoping that the homeowner will plant the tree?
So we'll plant the tree. So they don't have to plant the tree. It'll be a combination of the DPW and volunteers planting the trees. So, you know, we'll dig the hole, we'll put the tree in the ground. But in the program participation program form, they can choose their top 3 species of tree, and then they can also specify, so it would have to be planted on their property, so outside of the public right-of-way, but within 20 feet of the public right-of-way. So that is what would qualify it as a street tree under the jurisdiction of the, gosh, what is it called? The Town Tree, I can't think of the name, the Town Tree Act, but essentially it can't be cut down without approval from the tree warden. So as long as the tree is within that realm, so outside of the public right of way, but within 20 feet of it, then it will enjoy that protection. So
but that will take 100 years for that that tree to provide shade if it's 20
Well-
feet in?
Yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing, is that the tree warden doesn't want it to be within the right of way, because particularly when you have a sidewalk, then if it's within the right of way, then the root system tends to interfere with the sidewalk. So it lifts the sidewalk. So the benefit of it, of it being outside of the sidewalk is you won't have that problem. It'll be far enough away where the roots won't wreak havoc on it. But there's two different types of trees. So there are small ornamental trees. So those are never really gonna be like shade givers. But in many of the neighborhoods, especially in the older neighborhoods within the downtown, you have above ground utility wires. So the trees have to be short so that they don't interfere with the above ground wires. So wherever you have somebody who's interested in planting a tree and there are utility lines on their side of the street, they will get a small tree. So it's only those who are on the opposite side of the tree, the street, that are gonna get the shade trees. And when they are planted, they're gonna be anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 inch caliber. So depending upon the species, they're probably gonna be in the realm of 8 to 12 feet at planting. So it's gonna take a few years for them to grow to any significant degree. So I know for me, when I first moved into my house 13 years ago, I planted a 6-foot tall Home Depot pear tree. And now that tree is 30 feet tall. So it took 12 years for it to reach a mature height.
Uh-huh. Well, you know, maybe this is something we can take offline, but you know, what is our goal here? Is our goal to have tree lined, you know, to provide shade trees close to the sidewalk in the street for streetscape, or just to have property owners plant trees? So, you know, I guess I have to look at what 20 feet what that would provide for someone walking on the sidewalk. And
Julianne, it has to be within 20 feet. So if you think about the right of way, so your typical road right of way, depending upon when the road was built, the right of way is either 33 feet or it could be 40 feet. That's your typical neighborhood street. If you have a major street, not Route 20, but say South Street, chances are the right of way is 50 feet wide. So then when I say within 20 feet of the right of way, it could be 1 foot off of the right of way edge. So it could be as close as, say, 6 feet from the paved width of the roadway.
oh, okay.
And still be outside of the road right of way. So, you know, it's just, it can be as far as 20 feet, but not further than that.
Oh, I
So-
see. Okay, okay. That's
So
good.
most of the trees are probably going to be planted close to the road,
Mhm.
but maybe, you know, 6 or 7 feet off of it.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
welcome.
I think somehow your hand got up, Julianne. Can you put your hand back down?
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
how that happened. Okay. Any other comments or questions about this? All right, why don't you take it forward, Lori? And once again, maybe at the next meeting, we'll just get an update as to what's progressed in the next month, whether it's on an agenda item for discussion by the select board or where that stands right now. But once again, thanks for the work you've done in pulling this all together, and getting some input from Tower Hill was good too, to get some validation as to the species that are going to be allowed in the program, which was good. And I would think, Pat, I think that the Bigelow's has done some good work for the town in the past. So I don't think you should, shy away from working with Pat as a possibility of what they could do to sort of help out here in terms of pricing or any other things they could do that might be helpful. So you might be open to some accommodation with the town, because I think they have made accommodations in the past. So. Okay. Moving down the agenda, next thing we're going to talk about is the town office's feasibility study. And that committee did come up with a recommendation, so I'll let Ashley bring us up to date on what's going on with that. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, pretty quick update. We, everyone put in their votes. We did it on a ranked sort of voting. So everyone had to give their choices 1 through 5, whatever number it was, maybe 1 through 6. And in the end, it came out that White Cliffs was the top choice across the board. And so we provided that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and now it is up to the Board of Selectmen to decide whether they will move forward with, getting quotes on making White Cliffs that site, the site of the new town hall, with what was recommended by the consultants, which was renovation and restoration of the structure, plus an additional addition that would house a majority of the town offices. Or whether they choose something else or none. So really it was a decision to make a recommendation, and now the Board of Selectmen have the decision in their hands.
So will there be some part of the town office facilities in the mansion as part of the recommended solution?
Yes, what was recommended by the consultant was that the town administrator's office would be in the building upstairs. Downstairs would be community space, so community room, meeting space, things of that nature. And then the addition, which would be a modern addition attached. They say usually when you do it with a historic renovation, you do it attached by a sort of a glass connector, and then there's the addition. That would be housing majority of the town offices. And then the quote, what they quoted in terms of a price for White Cliffs restoration plus the addition, was actually the same price and less than some of the other options provided. And it allowed the opportunity for much more space and the opportunity to even expand the footprint of what was proposed for town offices. So there could be space for the town to grow.
Okay.
Sorry, John, you have your hand up.
John?
Yeah, Ashley, forgive me, I haven't listened to the meeting minutes or anything. So your update's very interesting. You answered the question just now that a primary factor in your choosing it was the cost. How did you get enough information about the cost of restoring White Cliffs to make that decision, when it seemed that we'd been lacking that, or it was perceived that we did not have good data on that from the original White Cliffs studies and so on? Just curious what went into that.
Well, the cost wasn't the primary factor. It was one of the factors for sure. It certainly helped that the White Cliffs site, from the consultant's point of view, and they did have a real estate consultant look at all the buildings and what their disposition value would be and what the potential cost of a restoration would be. In this group, the consultancy that did this work had done some restoration projects before, so they had some experience there. So we trusted their what they thought it would cost, and they also had the information that had been done for the White Cliffs committee as well, so they took that into consideration. But overall, I think it was really practicality. It was cost, it was practicality, it was a lot of things that went into play. It was allowing the downtown plan to proceed, so there were a lot of things that went into it. The 4 West Main was going to be really small for a town offices, would have required some additions that would have had to go over Blake Street. They didn't really consider going back because the town doesn't own those buildings, and the consultants weren't allowed to consider that, but it would have certainly required restructuring of that whole building and an addition, which made it the most costly option. It also interfered with the downtown plan of making Blake Street sort of a hub for a downtown revitalization. So that was sort of one of the reasons there. Another was the current fire station was considered, but again, a really small footprint, could have worked. But the parking was lacking and there was no room to grow, and it would have been really difficult, I think, to make that. I think everyone felt it was kind of a fitting a square peg into a round hole. And so then White Cliffs really rose to the top. And then when the costs came out, I think that sort of put the nail in the coffin on this is what rose to the top for most of the committee. I won't speak for everyone. I think there was at least one person that maybe it was their second choice.
Well, it's really a potential win-win for the community. It's a big lift, but it puts to rest some who say, you know, we've not had a plan for White Cliffs, and so this gives it immediate direction. Is it okay to mention this vote as part of the town meeting presentation? We have to bring up every year the CPA article for approving funding for the next bond payment, and I usually try to give some brief update on what's going on, and this is really the first in several years where we've had something significant to say that there's a direction. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's public information, and I will say too that when we had the public meeting, a lot of people came out and there was a lot of support for White Cliffs as an option. You know, people really wanted to know what the numbers were, and it's hard to know for sure. You know, if this is 5 years out or 2 years out, even numbers can change, so it's hard to say. But from the consultant's point of view, this was, you know, in the range of, if not cheaper than the other options. I didn't, and so yeah, I think the vote is public, and so I would think that it should be able to be spoke about at town meeting. I didn't mention current town office building. That was also, you know, one. I think that was maybe the second choice of most people on the committee, and but what the consultants did have to say was that property of all of them would be the best site for reuse for housing. If housing downtown is something that we want to see, that was sort of the best site for it. And if it were to be used as town offices, it would have to be, you know, renovated. Town staff would have to be rehoused for at least a year and a half. And maybe even it would be the same cost to build an entire new building on that same site instead of, so it was sort of a, you know, sort of a second option, but I think everyone felt White Cliffs was the easiest. And I think the cost factor comes down to the fact that White Cliffs is big enough that you can build a brand new building there, and that is less costly than doing a renovation, even though the restoration of the historic building was part of it. Just building that, you know, being able to build a new structure and making it energy efficient and all these other things actually was a cost savings in the long run. So
Thanks for filling me in.
Hey, Julianne, just for a second, I'd be interested in your feedback to John about his comment, given the fact that the select board hasn't weighed in on the recommendation of the committee. What's your feeling about what kind of expectations might get set at town meeting if John starts talking about the fact that, you know, the committee has recommended the White Cliffs, and that could have some effect on, you know, future spending down there, and setting some, even if he doesn't come out and say anything directly about what could happen to future bond payments, setting some expectation that, oh yeah, we're going to have the town offices down someday at the White Cliffs, when in fact the select board hasn't considered or made a decision on that yet. So I'd just be interested in your feedback as to how lightly John should tread on that topic at his presentation.
So I mean, as Ashley said, it's public information at this point. Anybody can watch the meeting. I think, you know, and John will do this. You just have to be careful that this is the first in a line of a lot of meetings and processes, and, you know, the initial feasibility committee decided on this, and just make it clear that it still has to go to select board and then town meeting and all the other, you know, all the other hoops that any other building has to do. But I kind of see John's point too. There's a glimmer of hope here for our poor mansion. So
Well, to Rick's point, Julianne, does it conflict in any way with the stated goal of getting a facilitator involved, if that's the right word, to open up more community input about, what to do with White Cliffs? Where now, it's really a town committee that's made the recommendation, which I think could be a good plan, although expensive, but are you going to get any would we get any pushback in that regard, that people will say, well, we haven't had a voice yet? Believe me, it would be a brief bullet point mention as, one path, not any, certainly no elaborate discussion about that committee's deliberations, because I wasn't on that committee. But, just as you just mentioned, to put out there one possible plan for White Cliffs, some action that's been taken where we've really been in limbo for so many years.
So you know what, how about if I call the town administrator, run it by my chairman, and I'll get back to you, John. How would that be?
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, again, it's
We'd all
of
feel
the
more.
art. Yeah, I think of the CPA articles that get presented, it's typically a brief notes and a reminder that we pretty much have to approve the article, or we're going to pay for it for more money than with CPA. So,
Okay.
All right, that's a good plan.
thank you.
So once again, it's kind of the long-term vision, for the downtown revitalization kind of hinges on where this is all going, to the extent that the select board agrees with this recommendation, and then warrant articles are put together to present to the town to approve this. As those things start to happen, and it turns out that 4 West Main and the fire station on Pierce Street are not going to be included in this town office's relocation, that then opens up a pathway to more seriously consider redevelopment in the from 4 West Main down Blake Street back to the Pierce Street Fire Station as the first catalyst scenario that was in the consultant's recommendation. But this kind of bleeds into, the next item on the agenda, the Blake Street project, that I asked Lori to sort of provide an update as to where that stands, because it seems like at this point, until it's clearer what's going to be finally determined to happen with the relocation of the town offices, there could be some delay in getting started even on an engineering study on Blake Street. I think, Lori, you got some feedback from the administrator to that same idea, right?
I did. So I've been working on the RP over the last few weeks here and there. And so I did speak with the town administrator today, actually, to get an update as to when he thought that I could issue the RFP for Blake Street. And he once again told me to hold off because the decision regarding 4 West Main Street sits in the hands of the select board at this point. So it still hasn't been decided what's going to happen with that building. So unfortunately, I'm in a holding pattern until we get more direction from the select board.
So my impression is that this is going to probably be an extended period of time here when, some of these things we talked about earlier tonight around street beautification and tree planting and banners are all short-term things, that we can do to help make the downtown look more attractive. But as far as taking action on any of the significant recommendations about downtown revitalization, as far as redevelopment goes, everything I think is up in the air right now regarding how things move forward with the relocation of the town offices. What opinion and questions the select board is going to have as they start to consider it. And then ultimately, when and how this gets presented to the town, for approval. I advocated at the public meeting on the White Cliffs, not the for the town offices committee. I advocated that I thought the White Cliffs was the best solution, both in terms of finally having a good use for that property and having that Blake Street area available for redevelopment, and even that some of the money that could be raised by selling off of the buildings that could be used to offset the cost of the construction of the new town offices. There are a lot of ways where I thought the two of those things kind of went hand in hand, but until it's more clear where this is all going, it's going to be difficult to decide what could be done and what RFPs could be issued for redevelopment. The first one being the thing we talked about for the feasibility study for Blake Street, as what could be done there. The select board did grant the use of $250,000 of ARPA money for Lori to start that, and that's in a holding pattern right now. So at least personally, I would hope that that money will stay held until this decision is made, and then this engineering study, can happen. So I think that at some point, once it's clearer what's happening here, a final decision can be made about that. So I would think that at this point, the Blake Street redesign is on hold, and I would hope also that the decision to fund that with $250,000 of ARPA money continues to stay on hold and could be released when it was finally decided, that we should go forward with a more active revitalization downtown. So we'll just have to see how this all plays out, and as things change and things are put on the select board agenda to consider these things, we can continue to consider how actively we want to continue to go forward with some of this work in that area from 4 West Main down Blake Street back to the fire station.
Rick, is there a sense of how long that's on hold for? Or Lori, do you know, like timeline? And is there waiting for a vote from the Board of Selectmen, or if you could give me a sense of the process?
As far as I know, we're waiting for direction from the select board, and I don't know when that's forthcoming.
Any idea, Julianne, as
Julianne,
the
do you
select board
have-
started
yeah.
talking about when they might put on their agenda initial discussion of the recommendation from the town offices committee?
Well, I know that we have kind of admitted to ourselves that we're going to be having extra meetings over the summer. And knowing that this is, imperative, because we have to designate that money by December of this year. Doesn't have to be used, but we have to know that it will be used for this engineering study. But in line with that, there was something on the matrix that was very interesting to me, and it was something about hiring a real estate like consulting firm or something to Lori, maybe I'm not reading it correctly. Would that be, a professional who would come in and kind of give us an idea of the use of 4 West Main, how much it would go for on the market? Is that what that means? Or
That was part of the sub-consultant. They put together a report for all of the properties on what they felt they could be sold for, and what uses were there, the likely top choices. There wasn't great positivity in the resale of any of them, to be honest. But we do have a report that was submitted to us as part of the consultant's work from a real estate consultant that put that all together for them.
I'll need to
Actually,
go
it's-
back and review that goal, but I agree with Ashley. I think that the work that was done for the town offices feasibility committee sort of knocked off that item from the master plan. I think that was the idea kind of thing. I'd have to go back and read that particular wording of that goal again, but that was my sense of what they were talking about, of having that done, and that just happened to be done as part of the town office's study.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley, could you send that report to me?
Yeah. Yep. We got it kind of last minute, so it might not have. Scott, I think, sent it around right before our last meeting. I'll find it and I'll send it.
Thank you.
Did
You
did
sent
they
that
give
to
you
the
any
whole-
numbers? Sorry, Amy, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering if all the information from the town hall feasibility could go to the, to the members here if they were interested in reading the report or any of it.
Lori,
it's
is
public
that, think that's
Information.
okay?
Yeah, why don't you send it to me and I can share it with everybody.
Okay, sure.
Ashley, do you recall if they gave any specific numbers or they just said, oh, it might not sell so quickly?
Yeah, I think it was more about, the chances of sale, and we had expected there to be numbers, but it's been a few weeks now, but I'm remembering that there weren't specific numbers, and there was a reason for that, probably because they wouldn't go on the market for a few years. But yeah, we were hoping kind of that those numbers would be baked into the overall, like, this is how much this one would cost, and this is what you would get from the sale of the other buildings, but it wasn't that cut and dry. It was more just like all of these buildings would be really not that marketable. It's kind of like the current fire station for West Main, not great in terms of marketability. That was kind of the response. And then the current town offices would be very marketable as a redevelopment site for housing, because it could get all these credits and incentives, and it's just old schools are really suitable for redevelopment like that.
Okay, thanks.
But I'll send it around. I can't recall exactly.
So once again, so I think it's going to be a while here before we're going to be able to make some significant progress or decisions on how to move forward with some of the more significant redevelopment things that were proposed in the downtown plan. Once again, in the meantime, there are some short-term things that we talked about earlier tonight that can happen, that can help to make the downtown area more attractive and more friendly, and get the businesses somewhat involved through this banner program and things like that, which are all good things. But we're just going to have to wait to see how some of this plays out. And I think we're talking about months, not weeks, before this starts to become clear as to what exactly is going to happen here. But I guess the next step is going to be for the select board to, review the plan, discuss it at their meetings, and decide sort of how to proceed. I'm sure there's going to be questions from the select board about the recommendations and follow-up that's going to have to happen, and we'll just see where that all leads us. And then eventually, as Julianne said, if the select board supports this, there's going to have to be fairly significant warrant articles put before the town, to agree to do whatever's going to be done here. So a number of things have to happen, which kind of leads into the next item, which is the master plan implementation matrix. I think if in fact downtown revitalization is going to sort of be on the back burner for a while, there's a bunch of other stuff in the master plan that we need to sort of get current on where we stand, and maybe our committee's got to sort of decide what's the next thing or things we want to pick off the plan. I think one thing we want to discuss tonight is that Gene Cahill sent us a proposed letter we might want to send to the Conservation Commission addressing another goal in the master plan having to do with, dams on the Assabet River, which came out of the plan kind of thing. And so that, or there could be some other things that we find. So I think what we need to be talking about tonight is, for those of us that have tried to use the matrix so far, what our experience has been, and there's other things that Michelle and Lori have to do to make the matrix more usable. And then when can we get all of our updates in there? Because I think if we can get those done between now and the next meeting, our major discussion topic at our next meeting be to take a look at what all these updates are and what else in the plan do we want to start prioritizing, and figure out how we want to emphasize, back to the town. So Lori, why don't you start with kind of an update as to what you've seen so far, what kind of feedback you've been getting, and what state the matrix is in right now?
All right. So I'm not sure how it's been working for folks. I did see that Julianne and Amy and Ashley Uh, Michelle told me, Tracy, that you were in the spreadsheet today, although I didn't see your additions due to the timing of when you were in there. So I know that some people were able to get in there. I did complete my updates. Of course, I've only been here for 2 years. So I did the best I could based on the information that I've had to date. I know, Amy, you put some additional comments in there and questions and added to it. So thank you for that. I'd be curious to know how you folks found the spreadsheet. Were you confused? Was it not user-friendly? Any sort of thoughts that you can share would be helpful. This is kind of like the practice was on you folks because we haven't shared it yet with the department heads. So that's the next step. So there's, you know, conservation agent, the DPW director, the police chief, the fire chief. They're going to get this, but I wanted to hear from you as to your feedback. So, Amy.
My only feedback was because Lori and I do have the same areas. So Lori had gone first and then I went in to update some, and by mistake, I must have hit enter or backspace and I deleted her whole paragraph. So I had to call Michelle and say, oh my gosh, I just deleted Lori's, and there was no undo. So that was the only thing I was concerned about, is like I couldn't undo what I did.
Yeah.
And she had the original, so she could input what you had. But I was afraid that by mistake, someone might go in and delete someone else's, and there's no way to get back to it without calling Michelle.
Okay.
There is, and so we're just using SharePoint now at work, and there is SharePoint saves all of the previous versions, even though you can't maybe do undo. There's whoever's the master person who shared that. So like Michelle should be able to find all of the versions. So hopefully, if there was an issue, she could do that.
She did find it and put it back.
I think in that situation, because, you know, Amy being on the planning board and Lori being the planning director, they probably have some overlap in their items. I think the instructions are out that say to people to stay in your own lane, you know, kind of thing, to sort of prevent people from overriding other people's stuff. So some of the other tabs are fairly specific for a particular person where there wouldn't be multiple people in there changing it. But I think there could be situations where that happens anyway. So, you know, I think that's at least good, Ashley, if there is a way that Michelle can, if somebody does accidentally undo somebody else's work, you know, find a way to get back to where we were, kind of thing. But it would seem that the greatest possibility of that is going to be in the planning tabs there, where we've got a planning board member and the planning director both going in there and trying to do updates down that particular section of the matrix.
I wasn't even in that column. Like I think I was hitting down arrow. And then when I was in one of hers, I hit like a space bar. So then hers deleted and I tried to go back. So it wasn't like I was even trying to change that area. But
So you were in the same tab that she was in.
we were in the same, worksheet.
Right. So it'd be more difficult for you to do that, let's say, to Tracy for recreation or something. Because you wouldn't be
Unless I
down
was
there.
in there like looking at what the updates were and
Yeah.
hit the space bar and all of a sudden deleted. I was just
Well, that's
concerned about
one thing we noticed is that a couple of people were in the planning tab when they were supposed to be in a different tab. So that was why Michelle sent that follow-up email, you know, identifying where the tabs were. Because if you're not often working in Excel, I could see how you wouldn't realize that the bars at the bottom are tabs. And so we tried to explain that better. So I'm sorry about the initial confusion. But if I could just clarify for those who have not yet filled in their tabs, pay attention to the codes. So like, for example, I got them printed out in case people had questions. Like, Fran, you are going to be updating the Council on Aging. So
Right,
your tab is gonna be the COA tab. So if you could
Right.
make sure that when you're filling that in, you're on the COA tab and just
Mhm.
write all of your stuff in that tab and don't worry about any of the other tabs. And the same thing for you, John. You're gonna be in the let's see,
Right.
CPC, CPA. Well, there's two. There's a CPA, but I'm sure there's not a tab called that. It's the CPC tab. And then you're a twofer because you're also on the Open Space Committee. So if you can go on that tab as well, OSC.
Well, Ashley contributed there because she's technically open spaces representative on this committee.
Oh, okay. Then if you could just
Should take
concentrate
care of
on
me.
the CPC, then that would be great.
Now, you quickly on that, I sent you over a spreadsheet with my additions, but I could not find an email with the link into the live sheet. So if
Oh,
Michelle,
Yeah,
Next
I
time,
found that
get it.
today. It was like March 29th. She sent that out. So you might want to check back to that date and see
Yeah.
if not, otherwise Michelle can send you the link again. But I was looking for it also when I found it in my old mail on March 29th. She sent it out.
I'll look a third time. I scoured it, but I
John,
couldn't
I
find
had
it.
to have her resend it today because I couldn't get into the one from the 29th earlier this week.
Oh,
So
good,
she had
good.
it
I saw the one
resent, and then
today,
that second
so.
one worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can
okay.
just go
I'll
in there
just
with the new
ask
link.
her to resend it to everybody.
The link you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah, she did.
the
She
link.
did today. So
Oh, she did? She sent
Well,
it to everybody?
Mm,
I
Okay.
think so.
I know she sent what you talked about, the explanation of where the tabs are and how to use it. I don't know if she sent the link out today or not, but she did send out that explaining email that
Oh,
had
yeah,
a little
maybe
red arrow pointing down to a tab
you're
at the
right, Rick.
bottom. So,
You could be right, Rick.
Fran, you had your hand up?
Oh, I was just gonna say
Yeah.
March 20th is the live sheet on.
And that was the one I found.
March 29th, yeah. No, I was just gonna
20th,
ask,
20, not 29th, 20th.
oh, mine was 29.
Anyway.
I was just gonna ask, in looking at the tabs, I mean, the Council on Aging is listed as partnering. You know, not the lead, but the partners. If there are lines where even though you're not the lead, you may or may not have already had discussion and or doing something. Do you want us to send that information to who the lead is and they add it so we don't mess up the spreadsheet?
You know, if you are aware of something that is not on your tab, so if you know that there's something in somebody else's tab, but you have something to contribute,
Yes.
if you could just put your initials in and then write whatever it is you want to write, so that way we'll know it's you.
Lori, I was going to suggest you have a process by which people enter information and log their initials, you know, have like a separate sheet that lists all of the contributors and then where you can kind of keep track of who's changed what.
Yeah, I know that Michelle, because she's the master, so she gets that information, but the rest of us don't. So like when I'm in there, so I know that what she did, so that for the planning page, when she saw that multiple people were contributing to the planning page, she wrote their initials in so I could see who was who and what they were saying. So she has that ability, but for the rest of us, like Fran, so if you end up filling in something on the planning page, because it doesn't appear on your page, if you could put your initials in. If you're on your own page and you've been assigned that page, you don't have to put your initials in because we already know it's you.
Other comments that Lori said, Julianne, you'd also had a chance to work on the matrix. You have any comments about ease of use or anything else about the matrix?
I couldn't have done it without Michelle and a couple of phone calls. It's,
But with
It-
Michelle's help, you were able to get your updates in there, okay?
yeah.
Ashley, I know you had a question. I think I saw an email you'd sent about a question to you. What's your view of the thing right now?
I think Ashley is gone. I don't see her on the screen anymore.
Okay. Anyone else who's used the matrix that hasn't commented on anything about it at this point? I think it'd be important between now and the next meeting to have all of us that are assigned to look at different tabs to get in there, get the updates in there. You know, I think our next meeting is whatever the third Thursday in May is. So if we could get these things, our updates completed in the next 2 weeks, so Lori and Michelle have a chance to see what's going on here. I think our major agenda item for the May meeting ought to be to get the updated matrix sent back to us, you know, like a week in advance. We can read through it and start to have a discussion around what does it look like, and what do we start to think are some of the next key things that we ought to be pulling out of the matrix and bringing forward to the town that we need to be working on. So I think the matrix should be helpful for that. The key is to get everybody's updates in there so we can see where we stand, what we think is complete, what questions we might have, and where the next opportunities are. Once again, if in fact downtown revitalization is going to sort of go on the back burner for a little while here, we really need to start thinking about what else in the plan here we want to work on. And as I said before, we're going to be talking about a little bit later about something that Gene Cahill has suggested as far as working on the dams in town kind of thing. Anything else about the matrix? Is there anyone who's got an issue with trying to get what's assigned to them done in the next 2 weeks?
Depends on how many nights town meeting goes next week.
Yes, I did want to put a plug in for town meeting. So of course, we have a number of planning articles, so zoning related. And the one that really is key for downtown revitalization is that MBTA article. So it's Article 49 and Article 50. So as you know, there is a state law that now mandates that towns zone a district of at least 50 acres in area to allow multifamily housing by right at a density of 15 units per acre. So if we don't pass the law by December 31st of 2024, then we will lose access to almost all state funding. So if folks want us to be able to get grants for downtown revitalization, it really is super important that we comply with this law. So if folks can attend town meeting and lend their support to those articles, then that would be fantastic.
Okay. Moving on under old new business, just want to give you an update. I had said that the decision whether we're going to start to have hybrid meetings was going to be dependent on a training session that the staff was going to hold for board chairs. At this point, that hasn't happened yet, so I haven't been able to be trained and see exactly how these hybrid meetings are going to work. I think there might have been a couple of technical issues that need to be resolved on some of the early hybrid meetings. So we'll just sort of keep this on the agenda going forward. When I finally get to go to a training session and see what's up here, I'll report back and we can decide how and when, and if we want to hold hybrid meetings. My general feeling would be if we could start to meet in person, I think that would be a good thing and still provide access to the community, you know, remotely. I think that's a good, you know, benefit to both, but I still don't know exactly how it's going to work, you know, what's going to happen there. So we'll just put that off for another month. Which then leads to the letter that Gene Cahill sent to us for consideration about a letter to go from our committee to the Conservation Commission having to do with one of the master plan goals, NCH 1.3, evaluate the removal of obsolete dams in order to facilitate habitat restoration and waterfront access. So Gene, why don't you spend a couple of minutes and just bring us up to speed on the letter, and then we could talk about whether we want to make any changes to it and what our feeling is about sending this off to the Conservation Commission. So why don't you take the lead on this, Gene?
Great. So I don't know if people had a chance to read it over. I made it extremely brief. It's a single pager and just hits the real high points of what the ORS organization brought to the table in terms of the benefits of dam removal in our town, regarding especially the two main stem dams in the downtown area. And as directed by the master plan, this would fall under Conservation Commission. So this letter is addressed to them. And really, you know, it, I think, just passes the torch to them to take this on and take it to the next level, and to consult with ORS, who can help lead projects and determine, you know, the feasibility of this for, and the weigh the benefits and costs, and as Ashley has apprised us, explore all of the different funding options, because apparently there's a lot of money that can be put toward this type of work. Lori, do you have your hand raised?
I do. I was curious because, of course, I saw in your letter that all of these dams are privately owned. So you mentioned that there's a lot of grant money out there.
Mhm.
Is there grant money for private property owners? Because of course, if the town doesn't own the dam, then the town wouldn't be able to go in and take down the dam.
Yeah, I gather it's quite a complex process of building, you know, building the relationship and moving these projects forward. But it's something that, you know, would take, I'm sure, title research and everything just to figure out who does own the dam. Sometimes the dam owners are located out of state and they don't even know they own the dam. So it's quite a complicated, you know, can be, you know, not a straightforward process, but generally these dams are privately owned, and the available funding would go to the project with the dam owners' approval to go forward. So I think this kicks the issue to Conservation Commission to ask them to take it to the next step, to do the kind of, you know, exploration that we did by bringing ORS in and making themselves aware of what what the costs and benefits and, you know, feasibility of this would be for the town, to all of our benefit, really. You know, if we could improve the riverfront, you know, I think it just would immeasurably, I think it's kind of while we can't change what we can't change in the center of downtown right now, I think the more we change what we can change, and I think the Assabet, the linking of the aqueduct over the Assabet would kind of tie into this in an exciting way to bridge, you know, that incredible resource potential, a resource richness we have here in town of great trail systems with a destination that people would turn off the trail and, you know, enter a downtown while biking through or passing through on long treks. So for that reason, I just think it's high time, haha, no pun intended, but it's high time for us to kind of link both the opportunity to improve our riverfront with continuing to explore the completion of that trail system and integration of that with the downtown. So I don't know how best to present it to Concom, but just wanted everyone's feedback on, you know, is this sufficient as worded to take it to that next level?
Yeah, I guess I'd be interested in getting other committee members' feedback in terms of, first of all, the proposal to go ahead and, you know, urge the Conservation Commission to start to do some work on this, and then any particular comments about the actual wording of the draft as Gina's presented it. So any feedback one way or the other about this? Go ahead,
Thought the
Julie.
letter was excellent, Gene. Very informative. So I would support sending it almost as is. Looked like it's more of a draft. You have a few things to close up, but the information's great.
Yeah, whatever you
Julianne?
see,
I'm sorry.
feel free to share if we decide to go on.
Julianne, you had your hand up?
I echo what John said, but I wonder if we should add something like, we look forward to working with you very soon, because I worry about these grants drying up, and I don't want it to sit on their desk for a year. Is there any way we could gently ask that they take this up at a meeting very soon?
I think we could offer to connect them with the OR's executive director. He has reached out to me to say they are extremely interested in working with Northborough, and what can they do to help us, to continue this exploration. So they would just, I think, be the resource we would like to connect the Conservation Commission with, to answer any and all of their their questions about private dam ownership and experience of how this is being done elsewhere.
Jean, would you be willing to be the liaison initially to connect the various people, or?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Oh, great.
And Julianne, I mean, you and Ashley both, I think, have also pursued river questions. So if you would work with me, I think that could be, I know your time is, you're split many ways, but perhaps Ashley and I could meet with ORS or, with Concom and facilitate a meeting with ORS.
Jean, I recommend that you reach out to Vinnie Vignali. He's the conservation agent. And, possibly you can forward the contact information to Vinnie. So, and, maybe explain the assistance that they can provide. ORS, I mean. And then he can work with the chairman to schedule that on a conservation commission agenda.
So Lori, do you suggest sending the letter as from master plan to Conservation Commission as a preliminary to reaching out to Vinnie?
I think it would be good to do it simultaneously.
Okay.
So of course he's the worker bee. So he's the one who would likely reach out to that ORS representative and get the ball rolling and kind of set the stage for the Conservation Commission. So I think if you could forward the letter and reach out to him at the same time, that'd probably be most effective.
Great.
Yeah, maybe you can copy him when it goes out. You sort of, to Julianne's point, I think just a couple of things that I noticed. I think the last paragraph where it says ORS partners with communities to educate and help coordinate planning, permit approvals, things like that. I would just move that up and put it after the first paragraph where you talk about, who ORS is, the fact they made a presentation on the 23rd. Just move that wording up and just have it a separate second paragraph, or just add it on to the end of that first paragraph, so all that ORS stuff kind of is together. And then to Julianne's point, I was thinking too, maybe there ought to be one more paragraph at the end. It's kind of a next step. So what we recommend would be, that you could work with them to make contact with ORS to get more, or, ORS is very interested in working with the town on this project. And as a representative of this committee, you can sort of make those contacts. And to Julianne's point, our feeling is that we should move this along fairly quickly because there are grants available, but the potential for grant funding to end is always something there. So you could sort of put like a tag paragraph on the end that kind of says this is what we think ought to happen next, and that you'd be willing to kind of coordinate this with them, kind of thing. And then I think Lori's right. I think after the letter goes out, get in touch with Vinnie, just have a discussion with him and let him kind of, given the fact, hopefully he'll be in agreement with this, and then let him push the Conservation Commission into taking a meeting on this and then making some decision about it.
You could
So
maybe
Rick,
revise the letter and send it to Vinny.
Yeah.
Make your revised letter and email it to Vinny and tell him what your purpose is, and that you'd like the next step to be to send it to the commission chair.
Well, I think we're a committee, so we probably should write to the committee, but to Lori's point, send something to town staff at the same time. But this is like the first big thing we're gonna try to do after downtown. So I think, again, Julian and Rick, you're right. I mean, we want them to know that this is a priority that we're now focused on, and that either at the beginning or the end, that we're choosing this as our next big project, right? To work on the dams. Or to encourage another committee to work on the dams and the need to address them. So emphasizing that in the letter to try to get them to understand that it's not something that we want to do someday. We're saying this is our next, priority that we're focused on, and we'd like it to be theirs as well.
Yeah. And I would think that at some point in the future, maybe 2 or 3 months after this has been done, you've had a chance to talk to Vinny, and the letters going to the Conservation Commission, we would probably send, if we haven't heard anything back, we would send another message over there saying, we sent this a couple of months ago, like to know what's going on. I think it's definitely within our purview to sort of manage these things and track them for the benefit of the town. So if the feedback you're getting is that the Conservation Commission has an interest in doing this, then I think we're well within our purview to keep track of how it's going. Kind of thing.
It goes on the matrix.
Goes on the matrix. Jen, you had your hand up?
Yes, I had two things I wanted to just sort of mention. One is because I went to the presentation by Oars and I felt some of those things seemed counterintuitive, I might suggest an article in the newspaper, that perhaps they can, like, informing people, just in case you didn't know, the direction currently is to remove dams, and this is why. I think it just sort of is right for people to see that kind of in their, as a like regular people, because if I'm a happy homeowner and I don't realize that that's the correct direction and that's what people are going to be asking of me, I'm pretending, obviously, maybe the conservation, it's sort of like the tree thing. You don't really want to target people, but you want to make it their idea in a partnership kind of a thing. So sort of like a little weird thing, but I feel like providing information, in a public way like that in the newspaper-ish or something, articles that can go out that would sort of prompt the questions from homeowners to say, I have a dam and what do I do? And I don't know, just an additional avenue, I guess. I don't know what the timing of that would be, but I would just make that suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Maybe, once we know the Conservation Commission is going to take this up, then some sort of public communication about this is something they're looking at. I think that'd be a good idea, but probably not. The Conservation Commission, if Vinny comes back, has a whole bunch of questions or says, we don't want to do it yet, and this is why. We don't want to get out in front of the public yet, but as soon as we get some feeling that this is going to start to be evaluated, then I think that's a good point, Jen.
And we could even have another public presentation, invite the press, and then they could report directly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Jen, you had a second question?
No, that was it. It was sort of like combined, like a combined thing.
Thanks, good idea. Other comments?
Ashley's just popping back in because I told her we were talking about dams. And
Ashley, you keep missing it.
I know. Sorry, I had to put my kids to bed at some point. It's like it's always in the middle of the meeting at some time. Sorry. Yeah.
I guess
she
we've
missed it, but
decided
I
that
mentioned that Jean, you might connect with Ashley and that you're going to send a letter to COMCOM and Vinny.
Yeah, Ashley, if you wouldn't mind just collaborating on this next draft, and perhaps then we can resend it out to the committee, get any last, comments, feedback, and then from there forward it to Vinny and the COMCOM.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to.
It was mentioned that it will be our next priority for the MPIC is the dam removal. And everybody knows that you have a lot of information on that.
Yeah, I think you could really beef up the support for, moving forward sooner than later, given that there is a lot of funding for it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to help. I'll take a look and see what I can add.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll put that in the agenda for next month. Obviously, if you're ready to move forward with an amended letter that you and Ashley and others are agreeable with, I think you could get in front of Vinnie and get this thing going, and then you can give us an update next month on kind of where this all stands.
So we would be able to move forward with the letter before the next meeting. Is that the will of the
Yeah,
committee?
that's what I'm sensing. I think there was general agreement on the committee that we should go ahead and do this, and I think that whatever the letter you and Ashley come up with, you think phrases this properly, I think you can just go forward and do that kind of thing.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
That sort of concludes what we had under new business, old business. I think it was communicated the minutes from March 21st weren't ready, so we'll review those at the next meeting along with the minutes for this meeting. Is there anything else we need to discuss tonight that we haven't discussed?
Can I just do a little announcement?
Sure.
Jen, can you help me out? The Go Outdoors exhibit is being installed as we speak.
Yes.
And Saturday is the start of the exhibition.
Mhm. We're
That's
very
down
excited about that.
down at Ellsworth McAfee Park, right?
Yes.
As much fun as town meeting.
How about that? Be shorter.
Hopefully it's a lot more fun than that.
Open up your wallets and make sure you auction time the auction. Mhm.
I don't know, I find town meeting very entertaining.
Okay, hearing that there's no other business to come before this august group, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second for
So moved,
seconded?
multiple.
Okay, I guess we have to do a roll call vote on this. So Julianne,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Ashley,
Yes.
Tracy,
Aye.
Fran,
Aye.
Gene Kennedy,
Aye.
Gene Cahill.
Aye.
Rick Leaf votes aye, John Campbell,
Aye.
and Jen Tolman.
Aye.
We are officially adjourned. Nice job tonight, guys, and next meeting will be whenever it's set on the agenda, third Thursday in May.
See you all
Good night,
Monday.
Thank you.
See you all Monday at town
See you
meeting. yes.
Monday.
Yep. Okay, thank